So as you know, here on Podcasting Strategy Simplified, because it's baked right into the title of the show, we love talking about podcast strategy, or I love talking about podcast strategy. And I love the fact that you join me each and every week to partake in these conversations. But every now and then, I find that it's a great opportunity for me to welcome my friends on the show. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on this week's show because when I was on her show very recently, she referred to me as her strategy twin. And that was very flattering. And I feel like there's a lot of value baked into that title because I know that our guest today has a ton of tremendous information to bring us about the world of podcasting strategy. But we also get to hear a different perspective on launching a podcast because she has done this a little bit differently than most folks do. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to Podcasting Strategy Simplified, Courtney Reimer. What's up, Courtney?
Hi, Jason, my strategy twin. It's so good to be here with you. When you told me you don't prepare questions, I was like, no problem. We could talk for hours.
We've done it before.
Yeah.
We've just not, well, I shouldn't say we haven't done it without a microphone and a camera in front of us because we did record the inaugural episode of your podcast, Talking the Talk.
Yep. You were my first guest. I mean, because we had met at Empowered Podcasting Conference.
Yes.
And had what I think could have been, so many people say this could have been an episode, but ours really could have, because we were talking about like really nerdy stuff about our shared niche of podcast strategy. I was like, yeah, nobody talks to me like that. So I love it. Yeah.
Courtney and I swim on that side of the pool, so you don't have to. We bring you all that nerdy information after we've distilled it and give you the important stuff, whether it's here on the podcast or in the one-on-ones that we do with the folks we work with.
That's right.
So, saving everybody time.
Yep.
So as I said, Talking the Talk, first episode, this was the brand new show that you've brought to life. But as I said, as I was leading things off here, it's from a different perspective. Most people start with podcasting, and then as they get familiar with the medium, they start to go into the strategy side of things, maybe look at podcast guesting opportunities. You're the complete opposite.
Yeah.
You have been in the game for over a decade. And
over a decade,
over a decade. Your business sounds great podcast strategy. I know you've worked with some great companies that we're going to learn more about as we go through our conversation today. But you didn't have a podcast. And as I learned when when I was on your show, you referred to yourself as the shoeless cobbler.
Yep.
Talking about podcasting without having a show. So give us some insight into what it's been like at this point in the game, knowing all that you know about this medium to finally bring a podcast to life.
Yep. The shoeless cobbler, as if the 2 decades or 3 decades in podcasting wasn't enough to give away my age. The fact that I would use that, like the number of people who even know what a cobbler is. But yes, so for years, I've helped other people make podcasts. I have been on as it was true at Audible, the other side of the glass, as we said. I would, have my hosts of my podcast and, help them be their best selves. And then I had engineers that I worked with and sound designers, and you get it. The whole operation of bringing a podcast to life with a corporate budget behind you is very different from being a solopreneur and then deciding I'm going to launch a podcast and I'm going to do all of those jobs myself.
Yeah.
And it's what prevented me from doing it for so long. A lot of things did. And it's also why I needed to do it, because a lot of the people I advise are people like you and me who run a business and also want to have a podcast. And my whole thing is build without burnout, add a podcast to your content suite, and it'll be a piece of cake, which it is not. I've never really said it was a piece of cake, but it is so much less of a piece of cake than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I was spoiled. Spotify had $1 trillion budgets, not literally, but the headlines you've read about the Meghan Markle show that I worked on are pretty accurate when you see those numbers with all the zeros after that. And then there's me in my little office with no social media manager to speak of or a designer. I'm literally doing it all. And there's something to the ownership of every step that can be a source of pride, But I also know there's psychological reasons of control that I am not hiring anyone, or have not yet, but I will. But I've digressed. The whole thing was basically an experiment, because I have certain frameworks and modalities that I teach both in my accelerator cohort and one-on-one. And I know them to be true from working with big podcasters, but I wanted to put them to the test myself and see if I could talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I've been tweaking things. I've been saying, maybe it doesn't have to be so dogmatic that you release every week at the same day. In fact, I just said to and this is total heresy, just to use like another religious term here, like to say, you say you're releasing on Wednesday and you're going to release on every Wednesday from now until time immemorial for the end of time. I said to my cohort this week, I'm learning which day is best for me, right? And I'm so glad I don't have on my description, drops every Wednesday, because it hasn't been the same day every time, because my energy changes and I'm learning how my days flow and how when's realistic. And then I will announce it to the world. I drop X day. So a little piece of wisdom: when you're starting out in your podcast, don't immediately commit to a day until you know that day is going to work for you. So I've rambled, but there's a little strategy nugget. Yeah.
Well, I think, you stumbled on something that I want to unpack a little bit more. With the way we are just absolutely inundated with information and content these days, do you feel that this standard my podcast releases every Wednesday or every Tuesday type of scheduling is something that might go away at some point, and we start I don't want to frame this in the mindset of, well, consistency no longer matters, just put out shit whenever you want to. No, I don't want to think of it like that. However, if you're in the ballpark, let's say you do a weekly podcast, you don't want to get all over the map, but if you miss Thursday, is it a crime if you do Friday? You still got content to your audience, and it's not like the audience only listens to you. They've got other things to satiate their listening and their viewing needs. Again, just something, food for thought. I don't know. I like to stick with Thursday. I discovered that day did work for me. And that was part of my initial strategy as I built out my own show. When do I want to be doing this show? Thursday, as I look at my calendar, makes the most sense because, for one, it's been, I guess, proven. I've seen this on other websites. People talk about it on social. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are your best days to release a podcast episode. I knew on my schedule that was the best day for me. So, again, food for thought. I don't know. Maybe we get there. What do you think?
So much there, but the whole, if you don't get it on Thursday, is the world going to end if you put it out on Friday instead? No. And the way I've given myself grace about this, and what I've shared with other new podcasters, is, first of all, one, I don't know how old you are or if must-see TV was a thing when you were alive, but
I'm 46, so we're close. I know we're close.
Yes, I just turned 52 a little bit ago. Anyway, so Thursday nights, everybody would sit down and watch The Cosby Show and Family Ties and whatever. Podcasting, like you said, is not appointment viewing or listening. It's not like everybody's like, oh, it's Thursday, where's Jason's episode? Well, I'm done with him. The reason we have a consistent day is both to, yes, create habituation in your listener, but also to sort of keep you accountable to a schedule, because yes, consistency is important, but also, and I think this is changing with YouTube, the whole reason of frequency and consistency and the whole weekly cadence rule that exists is because there is no real algorithm in the traditional podcast players where people will stumble upon it because it's a topic they have affinity for, because that's how YouTube works. And that's one way in which YouTube can be good for podcasting, but it's more so that you keep showing up in people's feeds, right? You know this, I'm just saying it out loud. When you are new, you don't have an audience waiting there for you right away. And they're not going, it's Thursday, they're wondering where you are. I think consistency of day matters later, once you've built up an audience that you've made a promise to, that you're going to show up for them every week on a certain day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way of looking at it, which is, I feel as long as this is what I've said to myself. I'm getting out an episode a week, mostly. I had spring break with the kids last week, and I was gonna actually put an episode out on the road, but I didn't. And that's okay. And here's another thing. And I know you and I have talked about seasons.
Yeah.
And again, this is kind of heresy in like the whole world that Joe Rogan has created, like at least one episode a day, or a week, maybe two a week. And I'm just like, how? And I say to myself, Courtney, you're doing every single role in this podcast operation. One.
Mm-hmm.
And two, you, as long as you show up regularly, as long as you're reaching people regularly, great. Now, another way to look at it is, I think you've worked with clients like this where you're very intentional and you know from the outset you're going to have, let's call it 8 episodes, because it's a thought leadership podcast around 8 pillars of your wisdom and what it is you sort of the expertise you offer the world. Yeah. There's something to be said for, with all due respect to the kind of freewheeling conversations we're having, a very intentional, this episode's going to be about this topic. This episode's going to be about that topic. And when I have a potential client coming to me with a certain challenge, I can say, go listen to episode number 2. I talk about that exact thing. Yeah. I often think we're not getting enough out of these. Each time I move on to the next episode, I'm like, there was so much I didn't even promote in that one. There's so many nuggets left behind that I am sort of in the back of my mind saying, maybe I will have another season where it's literally just, I know these are the pillars of podcast strategy that I want people to learn about. And so I'm going to dedicate each episode, and that's going to be it. I'm going to have a library that's, chef's kiss. And that's, I don't know. We'll see.
You're right. I'm with you. And I felt that way too. It's almost like this week's episode came out. Here's the new Hope Diamond. You got to see this. This is the greatest thing I have ever created. If you don't listen to this podcast, you are completely screwing yourself and the rest of the world, changing the game. And then 3 days later, it's like, well, we're done with that. Into the new one. And then the next promotion is this new podcast is the greatest. No, it's,
forget what I said about that last one. This is the real gem. Yeah.
But in reality, when I look at, and I can speak to what because mainly what I've been focusing on since I rebranded my show a couple months ago, one of the big things I can say now that I have a name that absolutely speaks to what this podcast is about is I'm absolutely seeing more listenership. And I'm not a big follow the downloads guy, but I can tell just based on looking at what episodes are getting downloaded is that new episodes are starting things off.
Yeah.
But there are many people that have gone back in the archives, and I'm getting pinged for the very first episode. Some people have gone back as far as the first season of the show when it was called Let's Blow This Up and started to listen to that content. So I think in this on-demand world, I think of my own consumption habits, and this transcends podcasting. I think of, for whatever reason, I just thought of this earlier this week. Happy Gilmore 2 has been out for almost a year now. I keep forgetting to watch it. And typically when on-demand content comes out, if I see something that I really want to watch or really want to listen to, I make a mental note or I'll even write it down. Okay, this is out. You can go consume this when you're ready. Maybe podcasting moves in that direction now because we are setting ourselves up, or at least if we've built out our podcast strategically, we're setting ourselves up to be discovered. And it doesn't need to be this week's episode that triggers that. It could be the episode you did 2 months ago. It's still equally as valuable. So if you're focused on your message and it's consistent across the board, now you've got something that can draw people in at any point, and then they can continue to consume from there based on what they want to listen to or view next. That's how I see this whole thing trending.
Yeah, and I love that you're pointing to your own behavior, and I think people should do the same. Like if they are podcasters who are coming to this because they are podcast consumers, your own, I call it me search, is valuable, right? And I've done the same thing, Jason. I recently discovered a couple new podcasts, one of which is about, I'm building a community of podcasters, and it's about community building. Again, super niche, not for everyone, just like we're not for everyone, but the people who love us really love us. But
they do.
All to say, the default like sorting in Apple Podcasts, which became my default after Spotify broke up with me, but that's a whole other thing. So yes, I'm an Apple Podcast listener, which is probably another aging me thing, but is recency, right? And I liked her content so much that I resorted it to sort the podcast by chronological, first, second, third, and I
Yeah.
listened all the way through, starting with number 1 because I liked the one that I jumped in on, and I
Mhm.
wanted to hear what she had to say on all these other topics, which reminding everyone, we are not news. This is not gonna be stale tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes, podcasting evolves, yes, new video features come out, etcetera, but what we have to say about there's certain things that are perennially true and aren't because it's not like, oh no, Trump said that 2 days ago and it's no longer true. Sorry to get political, but like that's not our realm. What we
Right.
have to say has more shelf life than the podcasts that come out as rapidly as they do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the big things I talk to anybody I'm working on strategy with is, and this is just a general message for any new or seasoned podcaster. If you're getting hung up on downloads, you're getting hung up on the wrong thing. And that's typically the metric that we use to gauge whether our show is successful or not.
Mhm.
But at some point in time, that number, the download metric, it will play an important role in what you're doing. But overall, your focus needs to be on building a catalog that gives people an opportunity to understand who you are and how you're going to help them.
Yeah.
And whether it's from an entertainment perspective, okay, well, you're providing entertainment. If it's on the business side of things, okay, how are you going to help them move the needle in their business? For us on the podcasting side, how can we help aspiring and seasoned podcasters get more from what they're producing? It's not just one episode, and it's not just this week's episode. It's all about the entire catalog, which, if you're looking at downloads, that's what you should be focused on, not just what this week did. And I see we still get a lot of times like, how many downloads did this week's episode get in its first 7 days? It's still a metric
Yeah.
that many podcasters pay attention to. Is there value in that? Sure. Especially if you're on an advertising type of thing, if you're using the old school CPM type of model where you're getting paid every 1,000 downloads, that's going to be an important metric. But for most new podcasters, I almost blanket this, all new podcasters,
Yeah.
that's not reality yet. So focusing on what matters, which is delivering a good story. If you're bringing guests on your show, bringing people on that can add value to not just your catalog, but to your audience as they consume the content. Get better at your craft. Find new ways to spin your story, tell your story, bring in new people, make your podcast recommendable so people
Yeah.
want others to listen. These are the focus points for the beginning. Then you can focus on the other things down the road. And if you're doing it right, different episodes will draw an audience member in, and then it's choose your own adventure from there.
Yeah, and I think, it's I feel like we could start, to get political again, we could start like a whole down with the downloads. Like
Mhm.
we need to like come up with other metrics that we track. I don't know exactly how to quantify some of the things that I find valuable, but as you're talking about, engaging audience and putting audience first, which is what I'm all about too. I also, though, have thought about lately about because I give so much of myself to this podcast and I'm constantly thinking about the audience that I'm serving. I also have forgotten to think about me, right? And what brings me joy and what I can get out of it. And I recorded an episode of my own podcast today. It's Podcast Thursday, I guess. And I the woman that I interviewed said that she interviewed people on her podcast for like she too was building a community. And so she same where she would set up sort of like coffee chats if she didn't have a podcast to kind of get to know their business and
Yeah.
whether they would be a good partner. What I mean to say is it's a relationship builder also just for the podcaster. So if people are out there going, God, yes, I want to build an audience. I know an audience is good for me and my business and my mission, whatever it is. The act of just having this conversation because you're curious about something and you want to learn something, somebody has expertise that you don't, that's a good reason to do it too. And if you've walked away from a podcast interview, like we're doing right now, with some new knowledge, a new relationship, that's a metric too. And yes, it may have the side effect of growing your audience or being good content. But I think it's okay to do something sometimes because, hey, I wanted to research this particular topic or get to know this person. And guess what? Maybe it'll make good content too. It's okay to have them like serve two purposes, you know?
Mhm.
So,
You're digging deep into my playbook, and this is one of the big things I talk about with guest episodes. What are you doing to get all of the meat off the bone when you bring a guest onto your podcast? You have to think of this on multiple levels. You can't just be thinking, well, this person's going to come on my show and give me 30 minutes for me to create some content with, and then we're going to call it a day. That's surface level boilerplate, not doing enough to maximize the opportunity that you have in front of you. When you've got somebody coming on your show, and for me, it's extremely limited because I've leaned more into solo content. When I bring someone on my show, I want it to be a meaningful conversation for the Bomb Squad to get something from. So the audience walks away from this feeling like they were impacted and they have something that could potentially move the needle with what they're doing with their show. But in the one-on-one interaction, Courtney, as you and I sit here right now, it's just you and me having this conversation. I want to think about what we can do to continue building our relationship so we can continue to network with one another, send referrals to one another, find new ways to collaborate down the road. That's the power of relationship building. And a lot of times I'll hear podcasters get pissed off because maybe 2 or 3 months goes by since they sat down and recorded, and then they share that episode. And like we said before, it's the best day of the year because this new podcast just came out, but the guest doesn't get behind it. And then they get mad that, well, I was thinking this was the best. I thought they'd be all about sharing this with their audience. And the first question I always ask when I hear that is, when's the last time you talked to that person?
yeah.
And they, oh, well, we recorded in February, and yeah, I guess it's been since then. It's like, okay, well, there's your mistake. They've moved on. They have other things in their life for them to be excited about. So if you really want them to be engaged with you and your podcast, you have to take the next step. That doesn't mean dropping everything and becoming their best friend and following them everywhere.
Yeah.
Typical rule of thumb that I follow is a good guest is going to leave one call to action. So whatever that call to action is, that's the most important thing for them. That's where you as the host should go engage with them. So if they say, I follow me on LinkedIn, that's the first thing I do. And then I'll post that I had this great person on my podcast to get the ball rolling. And then as I'm interacting with them, just by every day, not every day, but whenever you see something that you could add value to in the conversation, they're now keeping you more to the front of their mind. So when their episode does go live, they still have a certain level of excitement for it.
That is so smart. I'm sorry. I'm all about CTAs right now. And I just have to just underscore that to new podcasters because so many, I'm interrupting you, but it's so important. And I've not heard it before. One, you got to have a CTA. All right.
Yeah.
So do that. And then when your guest says to you, what if there might be like, sign up for my newsletter? You, the host, better go sign up for that newsletter. That's
100%.
exactly right, Jason, because you want to provide value to them too, in the form of giving back to what they, so yes. Plus
100%. And that's just it. Now that you're in their ecosystem a little bit more, it doesn't become this one-time transaction where they just came to your podcast and dropped some knowledge and left. Now it's the cultivation of a relationship. And not all of the relationships are going to become best friend status.
Yeah.
But who knows? You could open up an opportunity to where I just talked about this back on episode 82. I had an interview and it went great. And we had built some rapport even before the interview took place. So when we got done, since we had such a good time, he told me, I think I have 5 people that I can think of off the top of my head that would be great guests for your show. I'm going to send them your way, and then you can connect with them and make that happen. All of a sudden, I've got 5 new people that I can reach out to. That's at that time I was doing 2 episodes a week. So that's 2.5 weeks of content.
Oh my God, Jason, are you still doing 2 episodes a week?
No, I'm back to 1. I've come back to, well, that's a funny story, and I'll tell it really fast. This was on my old podcast. I was doing the show called Evolution of Brand. It had gone from 1 to 2 episodes a week just because Podmatch had been so good to me. I had made so many good connections that I had a lot of people lined up. And it was to a point where I said, if I only do 1 a week, a lot of these people aren't going to have their show go out for 5 or 6 months. And for me, that's way too long. So I upped it to 2. But because everything kept pouring in, I was at a point where I had to make a decision. The show wasn't serving me the way I wanted to. I was having fun. I love the content. I love the conversations, but it wasn't speaking to my business the right way. So I was at a critical point. I had 43 interviews on the books scheduled.
Wow. Yeah.
I
My
knew, I was like,
nightmare, frankly.
well, that was it. If I carry on with these, I'm going to have to put all this content out, and it's not what I need to do right now. So
Good
I
for you.
had to make that decision, and that's when I retired that show, and I reached out to all of those people individually and explained what I was doing. And some people were happy. Some people were upset. Not upset, but they really wanted to join me. They thought the conversation would be good. Other people just said, okay, then it's your call. But
on to the next one.
Yeah, but I think that's, to bring it back to what we were originally talking about. If you can think on a higher level with the folks you're bringing on your show, it just sets up more opportunities for growth, and that growth exists far beyond just the podcast. And that's where our minds need to be.
And how often do you have, like you silenced your phone? How often do you have this concentrated time of a conversation about a concentrated topic about which we're both super passionate? Like, this is like valuable conversation. 100%. And I would just, you're striking me as I must just not be in the same altruistic frame of mind right now, because I'm very much, what I'm hearing you say a lot is value to my audience, value to my guests. I just want to make sure Jason's getting some value out of it too. So I had a thought recently, and it's something, I don't know if you have the same problem, where I don't always, I'll espouse these practices to my guests or to my clients and my cohorts. And then I don't do it myself. And I'll remember, oh yeah. So there was a speaking engagement I wanted to land. And I was like, how am I going to, and I was like, oh shit, I should invite that guy on my podcast to talk to him, and then we'll deepen our relationship. And it's a little bit like, there's a selfish motivation there, but it could turn out that I would talk to him and he, me, and it wouldn't be a fit. But I encourage people to use their podcast if it is in some way aligned with their business and their goals, and maybe the goals of their audience, to build a relationship in the container of the podcast conversation. Because people love to be on podcasts, as you saw with your Podmatch influx of guest requests. But don't forget that even if, you're not going to get 1,000 downloads from a certain episode, if it serves some purpose, hopefully for both you and your audience, to have a certain conversation, I would rather have a conversation that's super meaningful to me and my 5 most valuable listeners than have 1,000 people listen to it and be like, eh. So Jason, do some selfish things. That's the takeaway. I want my assignment for you, even though this isn't the point. You reach out to, if there's somebody you've been wanting to connect with and you've how can I deepen my relationship with them? Or I want you to think of Jason, because you strike me as someone who's always thinking of his audience and the guests. Make one selfish guest booking decision soon. Okay, please.
Sure. I have no problem with that. Thank you for the homework. There's, to me, to go back to what you were saying in regards to reaching out, bringing those people on, you wanted that speaking engagement. I look at this, and this is an episode, if you go back in the archives, actually ended up being 2 parts, because I had a networking expert join me for a live stream, and I did a solo episode about the power of networking built into podcasting.
Okay.
And that's where something like the scenario you just explained, Courtney, really can become almost a slam dunk.
Yeah.
Because think about reaching out to somebody cold. We get in it. I mean, at least I know I do get inundated with just cold outreach all day, and a lot of it's spam. So I don't pay it no mind. But there's so much of that in this world, especially LinkedIn. For whatever reason, people think a connection request equals I want to buy their shit, and I'm sure you experience that as everybody else. It's no, God, romance me a little. Let me know.
Where's the foreplay?
I didn't wake up today hoping I could connect with you and get married. Come on now. Let's talk about what we do. Maybe there's mutual opportunities for both of us here, but you're just in sales mode with the first DM. But this is an opportunity to connect with somebody that's like-minded, if they have something that you want, well, this is almost like a training ground. Have a good conversation. Tap into this expertise that not only they're going to be excited about, but you're going to be excited about too. Now that you've showcased your abilities, it makes it easier for that person to say, they might even do it themselves. I'm hosting this event and I'd love to put you on stage. Are you doing any public speaking? And all of a sudden you can just be like all coy about it and say,
Right.
like,
I had no
about this.
idea.
Didn't know you were doing that event. Hell yeah. I'd love to be a part of that.
Right.
This is where the networking part of podcasting comes in. And if you're doing this for business, it should be an element. I'll give you a perfect story to support this. One of my clients that I'm building a new podcast with, we retired his old show. We've pretty much done a complete 180 in regards to what his content's going to be about, because he opened up a couple new coaching practices and we want the content to speak to that so we can repurpose it for marketing, all the good stuff. And one of the big things I talked about was the people he's connecting with could open up opportunities if he treats it the right way. So I had built out our email workflow to be all about the networking opportunities. So after the show is done, he follows up with an email the next day talking about how great it was to have them on the show. But I'd like to maybe connect with you off mic just to see how we can plot world domination together. That's my slang term for it.
Yeah.
But we didn't even get to that point, because after the interview concluded, in the green room, which we all know, at least you and I know, and the audience should know this too, this is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
They started talking about business opportunities. He ended that call or that podcast recording session with 3 new people he can reach out to his show and 2 new business leads.
Wow.
Just from having an hour conversation with that person where they both tapped into their expertise and just had a very synergistic, tremendous conversation.
Right.
That's what we have at our disposal here.
Yeah.
That's
I love
the level
that.
we should be thinking about podcasting on.
Yeah. And it's funny. I've had a similar thing happen with a client where I was listening back to his raw audio of an interview of a very high profile person in his industry who teaches at Columbia University, no slouch. And my client was so immersed in the interview, as you are, and in the actual creation of the content, that he missed that this guy had said to him, "Hey, it'd be great if you come guest lecture at my Columbia class." And I was like, "Bill, did you hear that invitation you got? Like, you were so flustered about making sure the interview went right. You missed this major opportunity."
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my little note too, is like, be open to those. Yes, have a great interview, have a great conversation, but those little nuggets of invitations and continuing that relationship, make sure you're aware and listening for them and inviting them yourself.
Talk about a feather in the cap for organic conversation.
Yeah.
Again, I talk about this often. I do this unscripted. I challenge podcasters to try it and just focus on what's happening in front of them. But I do understand in the very beginning, you're still developing that skill set. And I 100% understand that. But usually my first challenge is do a live stream. Do it with slightly remove the net and focus on conversation and see where it goes. But if you are putting together, and I learned this comes from my own mistakes in the past. When I would go into interviews or I didn't even call them conversations at the time. That's what I call it now, because that's all I'm doing is having a conversation. When I would set up an interview, I'd have 15 to 20 freaking questions in front of me. And if I never treated it as I had to ask all of them, but after a while, I realized I was asking maybe a third of those questions. And I said, why am I putting all this pressure on? Because I wanted my questions to be deeply engaging and they had to be worded just so. And I wasn't just asking fluff pieces. I really wanted to get the most out of that guest. And then it just hit me that I can do that just by conversing with them and hopefully setting up an opportunity for them to maybe tell a story that they haven't told before. Or like you and I have done, we have unpacked a couple strategic pieces that our audience can take away and start to apply to what they're doing with their podcasting. That's valuable for both you and I and the audience at the same time. So I think of it, again, it's elevated to a different level, but if you're not thinking on that level, you could be leaving a lot of opportunity on the table.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to go back to the not preparing questions, because I'm thinking about that too. And I
Bring
often
it.
just sort of go with the flow.
Mhm.
But I had a guest today that I knew, so my podcast is about, it's kind of, I have a podcast about podcasting. It's kind of a little tongue in cheek,
Sure.
but I know she has a podcast, but she's also about a bajillion other things. And I knew if I didn't have questions in my back pocket to keep her hyper focused on the topic that I need her to be focused on, because people will show up on your podcast with their own agendas
Very true.
and they will try and go off in a direction that is not relevant to your audience. So yes, shout out, keep it focused for your audience. But I think and I found myself in this conversation with her today about 3/4 of the way through, and I hadn't looked at my questions, but the act of preparing them and sort of mentally getting myself ready. Okay, that this guest is going to try and go off in this direction, read up on her, get some nuggets on her, and like the act of writing out the questions. I mean, it's like school 101, like just
Yeah, it's that
typing either.
osmosis thing.
Yeah, you have absorbed it. So it's sort of I don't want people to take away from this to not prepare. Yes, prepare. Both prepare your whole podcast. That's what we're here for, right? Know what your podcast is about. Know what you know, and
Yes.
but then in the moment, be present.
That's okay. Yeah, let me step backwards. Not
I'm
preparing
not saying you
questions.
didn't.
Oh, no. But I want everyone to understand that. Like Jason just gave me a hall pass to not prepare for my podcast. I can just show up and say whatever the hell I want. No,
Right.
that makes you look worse.
Yeah.
Typically, what I recommend is maybe put 3 to 5 questions in front of you that are all pretty centralized and can really invoke some good conversation, but then focus on the follow-up to that. So you're developing real conversation versus just, because Courtney, you may have experienced this. I know I've listened to podcasts like this more than I've been on them, but one time I was on it, the worst experience of my life. It was like a 13-minute interview, and the guy would ask me a question and I would answer it, and I'm trying to be as in detailed and in-depth as I can. His response was, great. And then he would move on to the next question. That was the whole, he never said anything other than great. And then at the end, thanks for being here. I was like, I don't even know why I was here.
This is when I get to the whole, maybe not everyone should have a podcast.
He's funny. He invited me back. I was like, I'm good.
You're like, great. No, thanks.
Yeah, right. No, I feel like the podcasts that people grab hold of are the ones that do have a little bit more, obviously have organization to them. If they're all over the map and the subject matter is not focused, then yeah, I could see people losing interest in that. I know I would, but it's engrossing, engaging conversation.
Yeah.
And I had a client once say, sometimes I feel like podcasting is like being in a coffee shop and I'm eavesdropping to the table next to me. I said, yes,
that's exactly,
perfect. It's a perfect analogy for this.
Yeah. And then if it's, I had someone say to me, and I've said it to other people, and I've read reviews to this effect, where for your solo episodes, it's like, voice notes are a big thing now. Oddly, I don't do them that much, voice instead of like you would think, as someone whose company's called Sounds Great, I love audio.
Yeah.
Anyway, all to say, it feels like you've sent me an audio voice note just for me when it's, so it's like, it's the two feelings that you're going for to invoke in your listener is either they're eavesdropping on a conversation, they're like the quiet one, just like kind of wishing they could butt in a little bit, or you're sending them a message that's meant just for them.
Yeah.
And I think you do that well. And I think but that's what people should think about. Like you're doing this thing that is natural that humans do. They either talk to someone on the phone or send a message, or they talk with each other. And that's what that's the magic of this is. Just being human. Just being human.
Yeah, 100%. If you want to talk about removing some of that nervousness that you might have, if you treat it as another human interaction that you have on a daily basis, whether it's conversing with family, friends, colleagues, customers, clients, it's typically not a nerve-wracking situation because it's stuff You're talking with these people about things that you're knowledgeable about. Well, your podcast is an extension of that. This is an interaction with a peer. And I say peer on purpose because when they're on your show, you're on equal playing ground.
Yeah.
It's not like this person's way up here and you're way down here. If they're on your show, this is your opportunity to level things out, and you can converse with them on the same level. And that's going to create a great opportunity for good content, an even better opportunity for you to start establishing that relationship that we talked about before.
Yeah. And I think I want to go back to something you said about, and I've heard you say before about lean into what you know and remember that you're the expert. So that goes back to the framing of your podcast. And when I just jokingly said not everyone should have a podcast, not everyone should have a podcast about a topic that they think there should be a podcast about. They should have a podcast about something that they live, breathe, and runs courses through their veins, right? And so it is natural to just show up in this conversation and say what's inside them. And I don't know if you've said it on your podcast before, but remind me how you have instilled, I'm now interviewing you, how you instilled this, because I want to take it from you. I want to learn it and I want to share it with other people. This confidence, this like trust your knowledge. You told me a story once about how you did this with a client. You had them keep rolling. I can't remember this story.
Yeah. Well, it's not something that I really had put into practice as, okay, we're going to do this and see how it unfolds. It was more by accident. My client was very concerned, and this is one of the first people that I worked with developing a podcast. They were very concerned that they were not going to get a half an hour's worth of content. Right. And I said, well, first of all, that doesn't matter. Timestamps are arbitrary. What really matters is that you deliver your message. But I'm telling you now, you know more about the subject matter than you're giving yourself credit for. So without even looking at the clock, I bet you go well over a half an hour, but just don't focus on that. Just focus on being yourself, having a conversation, and delivering the message that you feel your audience needs to hear. An hour and 6 minutes was where that first episode finished. And he got done and he's just shaking his head. He's like, holy shit, I had no idea. And I said, I know you didn't. And I felt like it was necessary for us to let it roll so you could discover it, so you could see it in action. Because I could have easily jumped in and said, well, now you're at 45 minutes. We already hit that timestamp. No, let's let this go and see what kind of content we capture. There's no reason why we can't chop this into 2 episodes if we want to, or delete some of it later. But I wanted you to prove to yourself that you have more knowledge on your subject matter than you're giving yourself credit for. And I've done that a few times with people because I think it's just in our minds. Again, going back to having all those questions in front of us, we're very concerned that we're not going to have enough to talk about. And then all of a sudden, everything derails and we're sitting there going, duh, I got nothing left to say.
Yeah.
I had made this comparison with, I was talking to my sister one time, we were just talking about packing and about going on a vacation or something. And I was saying, I was like, I think about this with podcasting because so many folks over prepare. And I used to be that person. It's like when you're going on vacation, for whatever reason, you pack all the underwear you own because for whatever reason on this vacation, you're going to have an accident and need it.
And they don't have underwear for sale wherever it is you're going. If you need
it. Like you're never going to be able to find a pair of boxers if something were to happen. But it's just amazes me that we still have this over preparation. But like I said, you want to say that with a caveat. We want to make sure that you don't just come in cold because I've seen that happen and it's ugly. But focus on what's happening in front of you and just be present. You said those words earlier, Courtney. It's beautiful. Being present in the moment allows you to hear things that you might miss if you're looking at that next question, thinking about how you're going to tee that up.
Yeah. And what I want to underscore, and I know you do this too, and I think this is like a plug for both of us and our business and whoever out, like anyone starting a podcast doesn't have to be us, but you should work with us.
Yes.
The real preparation happens before you even launch, when you're deciding what your value proposition of your show is, what your show is about, that title that you sweat over for weeks and then you retitle, and you want to make sure it's clear about what people are going to get. And once you've really nailed what you have to say and what you want to say and what brings you joy to say and talk about for however many episodes you want to keep this thing going, you nail that up front with your podcast title and description and how you're framing it, the rest does flow a lot more easily. But if you're shaky on that or it's too broad, that's probably a symptom of a ill-informed strategy or a lack of strategy. So I think people's preparation is probably focused at the wrong stage of their podcast adventure. It's every episode I got to over prepare, but it's really prepare your overall podcast and know who it's for, and then let it rip.
In a lot of ways, I think it's reverse engineering. We've been taught that each episode is this one big thing that we have to put so much into. In reality, it's the whole production, and each episode is going to be a working piece. So if you can spread some of that preparation out over all of your content, but come into it with a clear idea where you're going. This is why I push strategy first. This is why I have a whole podcast called Podcasting Strategy Simplified. It's to drive home the point that as you develop that strategy, all of these things that you might be spending hours on now, you're going to spend minutes on, because you have a clear idea of where you're going with that content or how you want to facilitate a conversation with a guest. And you're getting the small victories to kick in the more you do it, because it's not all about 1 million downloads. It's not all about landing the biggest sponsorship in the world. You got to work to get there. But along the way, you can create content that allows you to repurpose and experience some small wins in other aspects of your business. So without a doubt, thinking about strategy first changes the game for everything.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about that time, if you do have your questions, or if you're an inexperienced, or you don't have the gift of gab like we do, you have your questions, and let's say there's that moment of like, oh wait, I was thinking of something else or whatever. If you just think of your title, like for you, Jason, if you were like stumped, which I can't imagine happening, but like say the conversation dies, you're like Podcasting Strategy Simplified. Okay. You just say that to tattoo it on your wrist. So you like looked, oh, that's what my podcast is about. I know what my next question is.
Yeah. Anything we can do to make this easier for our obviously for our audience listening to this conversation today, anybody that you and I are working with one-on-one, it doesn't make any sense to overcomplicate things. If you try to add more layers to things and more tasks that are unnecessary, I can't see the benefit of doing that in any part of your life, let alone this potential content machine that could drive the results of your brand to elevated levels you never imagined. It's crazy. And I can speak confidently with, I guess, from what you're saying. So between the two of us, we have over 40 years of experience in the audio and strategy realm.
Yep.
I think we know what we're saying here.
Yeah, I think that's it.
True and tested.
That's the best of, everybody says be confident, but I think there are also other exercises that you've inspired me. I want to dream up of, like, how to make someone see that they're confident. You did the thing where you kept it rolling, but like maybe have them write out everything they know on a particular topic to really show them what they know, so that they can go into this and not have to have a script every time.
I think this is a good way for us to wind this episode down, because I'm going to add to that. And I think that, yes, confidence is obviously what we're trying to get to, but I think we need to give everyone that hears this message permission to be terrible. Be terrible first. Feel what that feels like. Experience it. If you come into this thinking that you have to be like someone you saw on television last night, well, for one, you're setting an expectation that's pretty much impossible to get to. And then when you don't, you beat yourself up. And then you say, this isn't for me. I'm never going to be able to pull this off. That person on TV, maybe they're polished and sound ridiculously great now, but they went through a ton of schooling and practice, and who knows what type of work they did on their own behind the scenes to get to that level of communicating. That obviously it resonated with you because you're trying to compare yourself and emulate that person. Give yourself permission to be terrible and figure out what your voice is. I know I was awful. And I had some radio experience, but I wasn't great then either. I wasn't Casey Kasem. I was just on the radio.
Dating yourself. How many people here know who Casey is?
I know. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars, Bob Squad. Right? Wow, I can't believe I pulled that off perfectly. But don't worry about it in the beginning, because I think what we do, again, putting that pressure on ourselves to be the best, most polished model of ourselves, it can F with our head a little bit. Not a lot of folks are listening in the very beginning. You have to build your audience, and that gets built through the credibility of your message and the better you get at delivering said message. So as you continue to build your skill set, your audience will grow alongside you. So in the beginning, don't be worried about making a mistake or finding your confidence or saying some filler words that may or may not get edited out of the final product. Just focus on being yourself. And once you hone in that, your message will flow much, much easier. And combine that with a strong strategy, I think you're going to be golden.
Honestly, Jason, I know you were saying this to your audience, but I feel like I needed to hear it too. Even though I've been doing this forever, I'm just like, it's still hard sometimes.
Sure.
So thank you. Thank you for that pep talk.
No,
permission to be shitty, permission to not be perfect. Thank you.
No, there's no shame in it. And I think one of the things that, I pull that lesson slightly from a great video that I saw Pat Flynn post. He was walking through the airport and he was recording a video, just a talking head video. And the point of the whole message was, here I am recording myself and people are looking at me. And I've reached a point where I couldn't care less that everybody's looking at me do this, because I know in 10 seconds, they're going to forget that they saw this because they've got their own shit to worry about.
That's right.
There you go. There's your permission right there to try some things and to learn and discover what works and what doesn't. Obviously, you don't want to defame yourself by saying something ridiculous that goes viral, but you want to ultimately focus on finding your skill set. And that's messy sometimes. That's not always going to be, I don't think that's ever a perfect picture. That takes a minute. But if you're willing to find it and you're committed to it, you can get to a point where you really do some good damage on the world that you're looking to impact.
I love it. Thank you for that. I'm taking it with me.
That's for you, Courtney. So I feel like we've covered a lot today in regards to diving into strategy. So I will leave with, well, actually, I don't even know if I can top what I just said. That was my mic.
Yeah, you did it twice. You had two really good endings there. So.
Well, Courtney, for you, I'm going to give you one opportunity. What's your mic dropping podcasting strategy that everyone that is either in the throes of developing their strategy or thinking about revisiting, what is one thing that we haven't covered yet that they should be focused on?
Oh boy. Okay, let me think for a minute. Well, we've talked a lot about guesting, and I'm getting ahead of the strategy, but to the point where you're executing, right? So people think a lot about the guests they want to book and how they're going to show up for their guests, and they're trying to impress their guests. And the word host has this implicit connotation that you are going to offer them some tea and make them feel special.
Yeah.
But this, I think, kind of blows people's mind when I say it. You're a podcast host to your audience. You are hosting the experience of your audience. Your first duty as a host is to your audience, because if your podcast falls in the woods and there's not an audience there to hear it, you do not exist. So remember, yes, it's nice to be a good host to your guest, but the very, very first consideration is, are you fulfilling the promise you made to your audience as a host? That's a good host. That's what I got for you.
That's mic dropping material right there, my friends. Courtney,
Thanks,
I'm so glad we finally got to do this. And again, even before the show was called Podcasting Strategy Simplified, long overdue getting you here on the podcast. So glad we finally made that happen. Tell the Bomb Squad one place where they can follow you for more value.
Okay, so I never thought I would, but I'm really leaning into Instagram now. Ooh. And you can find me at Sounds Great Podcasts on Instagram. And I'm really I'm trying to go for it. I'm going to do the sit on the chair way that Jason is. So stay tuned. Look for me on Instagram, sitting on the chair the way that Jason does. That's my goal.
First thing I'll say is I'm going to link the Instagram account that Courtney just referenced in the show notes, so you can quickly access her there. Next, before we turned the mics on and started recording this episode, Courtney was complimenting me on my very laid back, different approach to sitting here on a podcast. I'm wondering if I can start finding some different ways to really blow this up.
We could start our own challenge, like maybe just to each other, like
sitting. I'll sit Indian style on the floor and look up at the camera and do my next interview.
And I'll tag you, and I'll be like, "Your turn next."
Those boots that hang upside down from a door, and I'll swing like a bat and talk to everybody.
I'm here for it.
Man, I don't know if I am, but we'll see where we'll see what unfolds with this adventure. Again, Courtney, this was a great time. We're going to absolutely have to make this happen again.
Yep.
One plug additionally that I'll throw in for you, and I'll make sure this is linked in the show notes. Check out Talking the Talk with Courtney Reimer, and I'll link my episode with Courtney. It was the inaugural one, but I do encourage you to listen to the other episodes she has in the catalog because it's good stuff.
Thanks, Jason.
So,
your episode
welcome,
is a fan favorite, I will say. People
is
have
it?
liked that one a lot. Yep.
I'm glad to hear. We led with strength, right?
We did.
I did. That was a lot of fun, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Likewise.
So, Bomb Squad, I hope you had a great time with us today. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. Until then, I'm Jason Sircone, reminding you that podcasting isn't easy, but it doesn't need to be complicated. We'll see you next time.